So I will call the Finance Committee meeting to order. And we have the one item on the agenda, which is the matter of the CDBG-R allocation of funds. And we'll let Mrs. Byington have the floor to explain this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The city has been allocated just under $180,000 of Community Development Block Grant Recovery Funds, which has been called CDBG-R. In order to receive the funds, the city must amend the CDBG Formula Year 2008 Action Plan to include these funds. The Recovery Act states that the purpose of the funds is to stimulate the economy through measures that modernize the nation's infrastructure, improve energy efficiency, and expand educational opportunities and access to the health care. HUD may disapprove a plan if it determines that the description of the activities does not adequately describe how an activity will address the Recovery Act. In other words, the money is supposed to stimulate the economy. The basic restrictions with this money is that we must utilize 70% of the funds to benefit low to moderate income persons, either directly or through an area benefit. There's a maximum of 10% for planning and administration, a maximum of 15% for public services, and the city's to give priority to activities that can be completed expeditiously. I've distributed just a starting point for discussion, a handout on how we could start to look at using the money. The grant again is for $179,686. As I stated, 10% can be used for planning and admin. Our department is going to request that the 10% be set aside not for salaries or for admin, but for a planning activity. We need to complete our 5-year consolidated plan and analysis of impediments to fair housing before 2010. So we're requesting that that money be set aside to help fund the 5-year consolidated plan. And we must have this plan before 2010 to be eligible to continue to receive funds from HUD and the state. Second, we're suggesting possibly that the public services that we have a cap of 15% on, that we set aside money to provide public services through our parks and rec programming, primarily for youth and senior programs or activities that can be easily attached to those programs. We do have to be careful. The CDBG regulations state that the funds can't be used to fund normal government responsibilities, so I would have to look further into specific things and talk to HUD. However, we have for years been funding youth and seniors programs, so I feel confident that there's some sort of in-between that we can make that happen. Unofficial requests, well, first, the remaining amount left is $134,764.50. Unofficial requests that I've received include Cascade Park improvements, South or West Park bathroom construction, economic development revolving loan fund seed money for downtown, sidewalks and other infrastructure improvements in target areas, and emergency home repair. Unlike the normal CDBG process, HUD has amended the guidelines for public participation. Therefore, we're running on an expedited schedule right now. There will be a public hearing on Thursday, the 21st, 7 o'clock in council chambers, and the application is due into HUD in Columbus on June 5th. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Byington. We have any questions from committee members? Yes, Mr. Tanner.
Thank you, Mr. Bollocks. My concern would be, and I would ask and hope that you could definitely, and I'd make a motion to our committee even, is that we can handle taking care of West and South Park's washrooms and making them accessible to the handicap. That would be a good public service as far as I'm concerned, and I think it's necessary and should be done. Anywhere else in town, I guess if we couldn't make it accessible to handicap, we'd be getting fined in that, but yet, you know, we'd be finding somebody else that built a building without it and so ever, but yet we seem to neglect the fact that we need to clean our house a little bit too and get West and South Park recreation washrooms handicap accessible. And I'd like to see that worked out some way.
Okay. Any other questions from Finance Committee members? Yes, Mr. Oh, no, Community Development. Go ahead, Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mayor Grace. Will this money allow you to bring any people back for the Parks and Recs Department?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chairman. There are at least two people in the audience that wish to speak on the matter relative to downtown, possible projects, and the parks in general. Our view and the condition we're in as far as maintaining our properties, just to summarize briefly, a year ago, for last summer, during our peak times of maintaining our parks, which is cutting grass, maintaining the pools, etc., we had 12 full-time employees and 12 or so part-time employees. Those part-time employees largely working 39 hours a week. So in essence, we had essentially 24 full-time type employees last summer maintaining our properties. Presently, we're down to 5. So it doesn't take much explanation to describe that our grounds are going to dramatically suffer as a result of that. We've had, Mr. Gustav and I have had, and Mr. Eichenlaub have had considerable discussions on this, and as was presented in the budget, and this will be the subject of discussing the budget here shortly, the Special Parks Fund, last we spoke publicly on this matter, our intention was to use those funds to largely operate recreational activities. We feel we're going to have all we can do to use those funds to keep the grass cut of our fields, properties in general, but also the ball fields where soccer and softball, et cetera, take place. We are very likely going to need this $26,000 that's described in Public Services to Parks. We're going to need that just to pay for people to cut grass and to keep the ball fields available for activities to take place. So that's largely what we're going to ask there. Now, Ms. Byington has to confirm yet with HUD officials to make sure that that's an eligible expense. So we're not in a position, I don't think, at this moment to say that's exactly how we'd like to see those funds spent. That's how we'd like them to be spent, but we need to confirm it through HUD resources. But that would, we think, that would allow us to pay for one or even a couple laborers to maintain either one or a combination of West Park, South Park, or Cascade Park, all 3 of which are in the targeted area and otherwise would be eligible to use those funds. As for the $134,000, that can be used for capital type items within targeted areas to generalize. And Ms. Byington mentioned about Cascade Park improvements. Having to do with the pavement in the park. The entrances, the hills as you drive into the Cascade Park are in bad condition, and we need to repave those very soon. You might drive through there in the next day or two if you can, but what we think we'd like to use those funds is to repave the hill areas of Cascade Park, the pavement areas, and perhaps some other patching in the main thoroughfare. That'll be an interim measure, but it's getting difficult to drive down those hills. So we'd like that to be considered. The restroom issue that Mr. Tanner brings up is something I think the dollar amount to build a new restroom I think is approaching that $125,000 or $130,000 was an estimate to build a new facility. I believe we're grandfathered in those facilities in that they are built when they were constructed. They've met standards at the time, and in both cases we have the rec centers available, certainly for special events for the handicap accessible facilities. So that's our general view that we believe Cascade Park is in a perilous condition and needs capital expenditure to maintain the roadways through there.